And suddenly, Joseph and Lucy have 2 children, and for Joseph Smith Sr., he wants to better his financial situation. Now, perhaps you've seen that, I don't know, here on campus, where you have husband meets wife, they meet wife, they marry, they have 1 child. How's his hairline? Zoop. Okay, they have 2 children, boop, and suddenly he's going, what do I do to graduate? I got to get out of here, I got to move on. And this is Joseph Smith Sr. His conclusion was he's going to rent his farm, and he's going to move to a place called Royalton, Vermont. So he's in the same state, and in Royalton, what he's going to do is he's going to go into a business enterprise. Now, sometimes business enterprises are good, but this one proves not so good. He gets a partner, and at that time, they charter a ship, and what they're going to put into it is something called ginseng root. And their plan is they're going to fill the ship with this ginseng root, and they're going to send it to China. And the root in China at that time was used for medicine, and it was also put in perfume. So any way you looked at it, you could either, 1, feel better, or you would smell better. And they thought they couldn't miss. Now, there's a problem. They're living in Vermont. The ship has got to go all the way to China and come back. Well, okay, it proves that they were actually successful. However, the partner lies. And the partner now says to Joseph Smith Sr. that the ship has gone down in the water and everything is lost. Well, for Joseph Smith Sr., when he hears this, suddenly, financially, he's in big trouble. He now owes $1,800. And he realized today, if we owed $1,800, we would be worried. But if you owed $1,800 back then, they had something called debtor's prison. Meaning that what? Okay, if you owed somebody, you went directly to jail, do not pass go, you were placed, and you'd say at this time, 70,000 Americans were sitting in debtor's prison because they owed money and they weren't paying their bills. Well, okay, all of a sudden, is Joseph Smith Sr. in trouble? Yeah, he's in big trouble. He immediately now puts up his farm for sale in Tunbridge, Vermont. He's kept the farm, he's had renters, kicks off the renter, he puts up the farm for sale, and he sells the farm for $800. How much does he still owe? $1,000. Who has $1,000? Lucy. How come Lucy has $1,000? Oh, it's a wedding gift. Okay. Joseph Smith Sr. now goes to Lucy and says, I need $1,000 to kind of make good on this indebtedness. She says, yes, the indebtedness is taken care of. How much does the family have in wealth?
200. What was it? He owed how much?
Okay, he owed 800, 1,000, so they now have 0. By this point, they also have their 3rd child, whose name is Sophronia. Okay, 3 children, no money. If you have 3 children, no money, you've had this horrible business kind of disaster. Where do you go?
Live with your folks to pray.
You go to live with your folks. Okay, go to pray. Okay, good. In this case, they go to the Joseph Smith Sr. and Lucy Mack now go to live with her father. What was her father's name? Solomon Mack. And Solomon Mack lives in a place called Sharon. Okay, is it all kind of kicking in now? Sharon, Vermont. Okay, so Solomon Mack suddenly sees coming Joseph Smith Sr., Lucy, now 3 children, and they want a place to stay. He has a beautiful house, but, he doesn't necessarily want them all underfoot. And so he has kind of a log cabin on his property that is for rent. Our year is 1803. So notice Joseph Smith Sr. then becomes a renter in the year 1803, and he continues to be a renter until 1816. Well, actually 1818. How many years is Joseph Smith Sr. a renter? 15 years. I don't think anybody has that goal, right?
Yeah.
I want to be a renter for 15 years. You know, I'm going to be in the Temple View apartments. You know, I know, okay. And you'd say, but today, when you're a renter, you have a contract. And if you keep the place looking good, you pay your rent, they actually want you to stay there forever because you're fabulous. Okay, but back then, if you were a renter, it meant that the property was for sale. And if you improved it, such as you put in a garden, you painted the house, you put in fences, the landlord would get all the money and you'd be out. Okay, so Joseph Smith Sr. in 1803, he is now a renter. He's a renter on whose property? Solomon Mack's. And he's now moved into a log cabin. And while they're there, Lucy will now deliver her fourth child, who is named what? Joseph Smith. When is Joseph Smith born? Okay, 1805. Good. And it's December 23rd, so Joseph then becomes their fourth child. Now, it's interesting. At his birth, there were two people present. Name one. Lucy, good. Thank you. No, okay, that would have been good, but okay. Lucy's there, and try and imagine, we've had this huge buildup from John Lathrop, all the others, and Lucy, when she indicates the birth, she says, all she says was, well, in the meanwhile, you know, it's not like she goes, wow, I finally was born. All she says, in the meanwhile, I had my third son, fourth child, whom I called Joseph after his father. Okay, that's all she said. The other person who is present is the doctor in town, and his name was Joseph Adam Dennison. Dr. Dennison kept a day book where it's kind of like an accounts receivable, and it was like a Excel spreadsheet, and where you'd have, here's the date of his medical service, here's the service he performed, and here's how he was paid, typically in some kind of farm produce. On the line that says December 23rd, he has, you know, the date, helped deliver the baby, named Joseph Smith Jr., and here's how I'm paid, typically produce. And then he writes over it years later, if I had known what this baby was to become, I would have smothered the cuss. So in the next slide, you know, if the man you first see is Joseph Adam Dennison, you're actually going to wonder how you turned out, you know. Well, you may not actually have to wonder. But, okay, tell me then, at the birth of Joseph, did anybody know that he was the long sought-for prophet? Who would be the prophet of the restoration? His father named Joseph, he'd be after Joseph. We go, okay, what would you say? Okay, say no, okay, nobody seems to know. Okay, so here we go. We're now going to get Joseph Smith and take his life forward, and hopefully today we get into about 11. If you were to look at Joseph Smith and Joseph Smith Sr., you'd say Joseph's born in what town in Vermont? Sharon. Okay. He's born in Sharon, Vermont, and then you were to draw a 20-mile radius around Sharon, Vermont. You know, like you have some kind of, you'd say for most of that time, Joseph Smith Sr., you'd say, what's he doing? What's his big occupation? We read about it in section 4 of the Doctrine and Covenants. He's a farmer. He's always a farmer. He never is going to go back to being the businessman. He tried that. That didn't work for him. So you'd say, if you said, here's Sharon, Vermont, you'd say, where's Joseph Smith Sr. living? And it's almost like he's a nomadic farmer. He's all the time going and he's living in a different place, in a different place. How come? What is he? He's a farmer and he's a renter. Meaning, if you're a renter, what does that mean back then?
Somebody sells it, you gotta move.
Somebody sells, you're moving. No big serious contract, you improve the land, okay. But you'd also find another reason for his moving is that when he's a farmer, you always farm along the river, and the river is called the Connecticut River, but after the harvest is in, everybody would congregate to the nearest town. Okay, because you'd say, what are towns like? Well, suddenly in the town, your sister doesn't look so cute to you anymore. Okay, you know, you get a chance to meet other people, and so towns are good. So in the winter months, they go into a town, and then during the spring through fall, they're out by the which river? Connecticut River, where he's doing the planting. Okay, so now, all right, they're out by, okay, we're going to put them in towns. You'd say there are good things about towns. You get to see other people besides your family. You're like, woohoo! Okay. You'd say other good things about towns, they have organized religion. Other good things about towns, if you need to repair your tools, there's going to be a blacksmith that comes into town. There's, you know, somebody's going to help with that. You'd say in towns you have education. For Joseph Smith Sr. to supplement his income, every time he goes into a town, he becomes a school teacher. So we can actually identify literally almost a dozen moves of Joseph Smith Sr. during this time. And so he has his family out by the river, and then he has them in town, and he supplements his income by being a what? School teacher. I can speak to the fallacy of that. And, you know, nevertheless, okay, a school teacher is how he supports himself. Now, of all of these moves, and notice they're all within about 20 miles of Sharon, Vermont. So you'd say, oh, Lucy, you go back and visit family, you know, you're pretty close to Grandpa. Okay, of all of those moves, and all of the different little towns that the Smiths move into, there's one town that we actually know an incident in the life of Joseph Smith, and the name of that town is Lebanon, New Hampshire. Notice it's not Lebanon, war-torn over there, but it's Lebanon, New Hampshire. Okay. You'd say the good things of towns. What are the good things of towns?
Religion.
Sisters
not looking so good yet.
Sisters don't look good, you know, okay, good, okay. And education, you know, all those things. There are bad things of towns, such as if you're going to be robbed, it will be in a town. But you'd say, what's the worst thing in a town? And it's an epidemic. Okay, so, you know, you'd say epidemics are really, really tough. When Joseph Smith is about 7 years old, his father, now they've finished the farming time out by the Connecticut River, and they've moved into a town called West Lebanon, New Hampshire. As they move into the town, suddenly the town is plagued with a horrible epidemic called typhus. Typhus. I'm not sure how to spell it. Something like that. It's like typhoid. And, well, it's a horrible disease. You get a very high fever, so high you can actually lose all of your hair. And, okay, so it used to be back then, a doctor would be called for to come to your house. As the doctor would come to the house, he would then check out to see if anyone in the house had a communicable disease. In other words, one that would pass from neighbor to neighbor. And if he thought you did, he would then go out front and he would put a sign in your front yard, and the sign said quarantine. In other words, nobody comes to this house, nobody leaves the house until the doctor removes the sign, and therefore you make sure that the disease is trapped in one home. Make sense? Okay. Have you ever been sick and say your roommate comes home, he's sick, and suddenly you're in the same room, what's going to happen to you? You're going to get sick. So my husband says, hey, he has a sore throat, and I go, oh, how could you? Okay, you'd say it's coming right my way, right? So what's going to happen with the Smiths? Suddenly, Sophronia, which number child is she in the family? Third. Okay, Sophronia now doesn't feel well. Well, the family's very worried. They now send for a local doctor. Local doctor comes with his wagon. He's got all these kind of signs in the back that say quarantine. He goes in, he checks out Sophronia, and sure enough, she has this typhus fever. He puts a sign in the front yard. He then leaves. All of a sudden, you'd say, what happens in the house? Every single child gets it. So tell me, who are the children so far?
Alvin, Hiram,
Sophronia, Joseph. So Joseph, and soon there's starting to be others. Everybody gets it. But mom and dad, it must be that by this point in their lives, they are immune from it. Now, typically, when this fever ends, you get some kind of blister on your body. So think about it. We've all had high fevers, and afterwards, when the fever's going, typically we get a fever blister on our lip. And then someone will see you and they go, wow, you don't look good. And you go, oh, I feel so much better. Because this is kind of just the last of what I've been through. Well, okay. For each family member, they all recovered from the disease and had no complications, with the exception of which child? Joseph. Okay. So here's Joseph. He's about 7 years old, and suddenly the first place he's going to get this fever blister is right underneath his right shoulder blade. The local doctor is now called in, and local doctor, notice he's doctor/farmer. And so the question is, he's got the blister underneath his right shoulder blade. We need to lance it. And so the doctor's method, you realize today, doctors say they practice medicine. And I'm always looking for a doctor that no longer practices, but actually knows what he's doing. You know, I'm like, come on, I don't want to play you if you're still just practicing. You know, you got to be good. Okay, so, all right, the doctor uses a method called the shot shovel method. And what it is you take a shovel, you heat it in hot coals, and you place it on the blister till it lances. Tell me, would it work? Sure. Okay, try it. Okay. Next time you get a blister on your thumb, try heating it up in a shovel, putting it on it, and for sure, okay. So Lucy actually writes about the amount of pus that comes out of the blister, saying she thought it was about a pint.
Cool.
So when we're talking a blister, you know, we're not talking the tiny blister you get from hammering, or a blister because you've been on a run and you had the bad shoes. Okay. So you'd say the blister on his back heals. However, a blister soon appears above his left ankle. Once again, same doctor comes, and once again he uses what kind of method?
Shovel.
Shot shovel. Heat it, put it on, and sure enough, blister lances. But bad news for Joseph, the blister comes back. Here comes doctor, again and again, and suddenly the doctor goes, oops, it's beyond my medical knowledge. And lucky for Joseph, there is a medical school just a few miles away called Dartmouth Medical College. In other words, you know, you got the local doctor, he can't solve it, medical school, you know, perhaps, you know, they're always on the cutting edge, no pun intended. But if you're, you know, if you're willing to be the experimentee, they will be happy to do whatever, you know, to try and solve this. Well, okay. Well, medical doctor, his name is Nathan Smith, no relative to Joseph Smith. He now brings 11 interns, meaning men that hope to one day be a doctor, and they now come to see Joseph. In other words, you can be in class and see charts, but well, we've got a live body over here. Come on, it's about 5 miles away. Let's go on over. So you've got these 11 interns come, and to now look at Joseph's leg. As they look at his leg, their conclusion is, to save the boy's life, we need to cut off his foot right above the ankle. Now, you realize if that were to happen to us, we'd be in counseling for years. But most of you are going to school so that you'll be able to sit behind the desk. And actually, you know, with modern ramps and handicap everything, you could have a, quote, fairly normal life. But in the 19th century, you cut off the boy's foot, suddenly it means he can only live in a town. You know, he's going to be like the Cratchits. You all seen the Christmas Carol? You know, okay. You relegate him to poverty. He would never be able to have 100 acres. He could never have a wife. He could never have children. He'd never have a normal life because he would only be able to work in the town, and towns empty out to be farmers, and then they come back in the winter. So at this point, the Smiths, including Joseph, wants to know, is there not another way? In other words, give me option here. You've told me you're going to cut off the foot. Is there another option? Well, in a medical school, there's always another option. If you're willing to be part of an experimental group, you know, they are willing to take you. Well, that particular medical school was trying the option. And the option was, they said they could go in, they could take out the diseased portion of Joseph's bone on his leg, and then sew it up and see if it worked. And then if it didn't work, then they'd have to do operation the next one and cut off the foot. Okay, the family and Joseph now agreed to the operation. Go in, take out the diseased portion.
How old is he now?
He's about 7. Now, there are 2 accounts as to where it occurs. The medical school says it occurs at the medical school. And obviously that makes a lot of sense. You know, medical school, more sterile, clean, everything else. For Lucy Mack Smith, she says it takes place at her home. And, you know, so you got the 2 places. The more dramatic story goes to Lucy, and it's the one you hear most often in the church. So I'm going to do that one.